So I think we are live, but there's a little bit of a delay. So I'm gonna let it roll for like 30 seconds or so and let the stream catch up. But let's see. And I haven't streamed in a while. It's actually been 8 months. I think it's been 8 months, maybe a little bit longer since the last time I've streamed. So a lot has changed in the software. So bear with me a little bit as I relearn to navigate all this stuff. But we'll just hang out for probably like 5 minutes. If you have any questions, you can ask them in the chat. In like 5 minutes, then I'll kind of make our big announcement, and then I'll be answering any questions you guys have. If you have questions, you can throw them in the chat. I'm really excited tonight because I'm going to walk you through the expansion, which I haven't had the opportunity to do yet. So I'll show you some of the new stuff in the expansion, show you how it works, and answer any questions that you have as we go through it. Hello, Duncan. Welcome to the chat. William. So many familiar names that of people I've kind of interacted with in the comments for the last year. And yeah, it feels good to be back on. I won't lie, I'm a little bit nervous because it's been so long since I've done this. But we'll wait. Yeah, we'll give kind of people a few minutes to join us. Maybe to start off, I'll talk a little bit about how things have been over the last 8 or so months since the last time I was on stream. So as a lot of you probably know, we sold out of our game back in November, at the very end of November, early December. So Necromolds sold out really, really fast, which was fantastic. Both the people who bought it and their families have loved the game, and you can see all the different reviews in the photo reviews, which are awesome to see on our website. And then also reviewers seem to really love Necromolds as well. And the first Kickstarter was really all about just making it happen. You know, so the first Kickstarter was, we've got this crazy idea. We want to make these little plastic spell books and make monsters, and it's really expensive to make, and it's kind of crazy, but we want to make it and see what people think. And that's what the first Kickstarter was all about. And luckily the Kickstarter funded. We went through manufacturing. COVID came along, kind of threw everything up in the air. But luckily we were able to make everything, make it all super, super high quality, and actually get it fulfilled. So it made it to all of you. So that was really the first Kickstarter, right? Was, can we make this thing? And really the biggest question is, do people think it's fun? Because if people didn't think it was fun and they thought it was awful, then that's kind of where everything would have ended. But luckily, you all love Necromolds as much as I love Necromolds, and I love working on Necromolds. So I'm just excited to have the opportunity to kind of keep building the universe with this new expansion. I've been working with a friend of mine, Zane Mencia, to work on a whole lore book that's going to be part of the expansion and battle box, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a couple more minutes. For those who are joining, we're just going to wait a couple more minutes for everyone to jump on. Then I'll make the big announcement, and then we'll move through and start showing off some of the new stuff. I'm trying to think what else there was. Oh yeah, so then anyways, so Kickstarter went well. We fulfilled we sold all our product back in November, December, and it sold out a lot faster than we had anticipated. And so we had been working on this expansion a little bit during that time, but once we saw that things were going to sell out a lot faster than we had anticipated, we really amped up development on this expansion and trying to cram as much cool stuff in it as we could. And then through all that time, I had like a lot of big life things happen, which I'm really excited about. So I moved, still in Minneapolis, but I moved. Sold my old house, which was its own big adventure. Getting married, which I'm actually getting married in 2 weeks, so that's right around the corner. And then just a lot of other kind of life things happened. And for those who don't know, Necromolds is a very indie game, right? So I am the choke point essentially in the development of Necromolds. So when my life gets busy, things slow down. So but I've stayed on top of it, and I have some really, really awesome friends who I was able to kind of pass some of the responsibility onto at points where both my personal life and my work life, I have a full-time job outside of Necromolds. So when those things got busy, I had friends who came along and stepped in and helped me keep things moving forward as my life got busy, so then we could be here today. All right. Oh, thank you, Tim. Yeah, I was going to ask if people could post, if they want to post this live stream to the other channels. I've been meaning to post it on Twitter too. So if somebody can actually post the link in the comments, then I'll copy and paste it from the comments into Twitter, because I can't seem to find the link. All right. It's 5 minutes after 7. I think I've waited long enough, and I can always repeat it for those who join in a little bit later. But the exciting news, as most of you probably guessed, is that we have a Kickstarter date. And it's, oh, here we go. I have to pause because I just got the link. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you, Tim. Let me copy and paste this. Bear with me. Copy. Exciting Necromolds news. Everyone can watch me type out a tweet. All right, and games. And done. All right, cool. There we go. Thank you, everybody. All right, I digress. So here we are. First Kickstarter was successful. We've got a whole new expansion ready. A lot of you are just waiting for the reprint or to get the monster packs that you missed out on. So we actually finally have a Kickstarter date, and the date is going to be, little drum roll emojis, September 13th. So Tuesday, September 13th, only 3 weeks away. So we are right around the corner from release. And I think the thing I'm most excited about is actually kind of taking our banner, ta-da, and sticking it in the ground and saying, this is the date that we're going to launch. And it's right around the corner. We've been working on the Kickstarter page, and over the next few weeks, I'm going to be doing things like working on the video, taking new photos, and just updating our Kickstarter page. And then I'll share it with you guys once we have the preview page up. But the most important thing is the only way this is going to work, both the reprint and the expansion, is if we can get as many people to show up for that September 13th Kickstarter date as possible. And I know there's a lot of people, like I said, waiting for the reprint or to grab monster packs, and I can talk a little bit about some of those pledge levels that we'll have available tonight. But yeah, September 13th. And, the first Kickstarter was great because, like I said, it was all about just seeing if the game could be made and seeing what people thought about it. And this Kickstarter is especially important because it's all about, first, just growing the world of Necromolds with kind of new toys, new monsters, new gameplay mechanics. But it's also super important because it's all about growing the business side of Necromolds too, because in my ideal world, I don't want to have to do a Kickstarter every time we want to make a new monster pack. And if we can fully fund this Kickstarter and hopefully blow past our stretch goals that we've got built for this Kickstarter, that'll put us in a place where we can just start working on new monster packs. And instead of having to wait a year turnaround time to do reprints, we can just order more product whenever we start to run low. So this whole Kickstarter is really about getting the wheels moving with Necromolds as a business and being able to grow it even faster. So I'm really excited to kind of get it out there in the world, have our flag planted, and get both the reprint out there and the expansion. And before we get into the details on the expansion, some other cool, important things to note are we have translations we've been working on. So one thing that I'm excited about is we have a translation for, we have a German translation, a French translation, and a Japanese translation that have all been in the works over the last month or so. So that's one thing that I'm excited about is we'll now have a way to kind of share Necromolds with an even larger community this time around. And we're translating the second printing of the core rulebook, which if you go on our Discord channel, you can actually find a preview of. Not a lot of changes from the original, just formatting changes and integrating some of our, a few of the addendum rules that we had, errata rules that we had are added in the new rulebook. And that's, like I said, is being translated in 3 different languages, and the expansion will all be translated as well. Still manufactured in English because we're still at a small enough print size where we can't afford to segment it out yet. But I'm hoping we can maybe do that someday. But at least this gives a way for those who speak and play in other languages can enjoy Necromolds, print off the rule book, and also print off the shared play cards to play with your friends. All right, let's see here. The Kickstarter will be, so again, for those who might have joined late, the Kickstarter is happening on September 13th, which is a Tuesday. It's 3 weeks away. And then what else? I saw one other question I was going to answer. Oh, yes, Michael asked about the, so the Kickstarter is going to be, I think I'm trying to do 23 days, I think. So I've kind of timed it out on the calendar, and I'd like it to do 23 days because what I learned from the first Kickstarter is that, and I guess this is, for anyone who follows Kickstarter, this is kind of common knowledge a little bit, but like the first few days, you get a lot of backers, right? Because everybody shows up the first few days, and then there's like a 2-week period in between where things kind of steadily climb, and then they kind of plateau, but you want to keep up the energy for those weeks, and then finally there's the last few days where the campaign's about to end, and then you get kind of that final surge as you maybe show up on the front page of Kickstarter, or people are just helping, trying to push past any stretch goals that you haven't unlocked yet. So 23-day campaign is kind of what I'm planning on for this time around. All right, and then I saw that Jacob asked about the giant spellbook in the back. I'll go grab it. You get to see me in a leather jacket with shorts on, which is awesome. Nothing looks goofier than that. Okay, here's the giant spellbook. So I 3D printed this, and this is something that I made for April Fool's Day a few years, or maybe it was 2 years ago. And it actually it's functional. It's a giant mud mump spellbook. I tried making a like an actual mud mump. So I made a mud pie, and I tried to make a mud mump, and it did not work, and it made the spellbook smell awful. So I do not recommend actually trying to use mud to make a mud mump. It does not work as well as you would hope. All right, so I'm going to switch over to my other camera here. Wrong button. There we go. All right, my little tabletop camera. So feel free to ask any questions in the chat. Oh, one thing too, the thing I really loved about the poll that we did this morning, or not the poll, I guess it was just the question we posted on Facebook about what you thought the announcement would be today, is that there were a lot of really cool and exciting ideas that people brought up, like larger monsters, co-op, a lot of cool game mechanic ideas, and those are all things that we've kind of been tinkering with a little bit internally, and those are things that I'm hoping that, again, if we can get this Kickstarter to be a success and really get Necromolds to take off through this Kickstarter, I'll just be able to really ramp up development on those ideas. And again, not have to go to Kickstarter for each of those ideas, but to be able to release little expansions, like a little co-op expansion or a little adventure or even, bigger spell books and stuff like that. All right, so, so look at, there's some other goodies there. All right, so I'm gonna kind of walk everybody through, yes, a TTRPG. I have thought about that. I've thought about doing a 5th edition like RPG supplement or just a kind of a D20 supplement. So there's a lot of really exciting directions I want to bring Necromolds. And finally, before I get into this, the expansion stuff, I do want to say one of the most exciting things about having the first Kickstarter be done and having the game be I think I would say it was pretty successful, I guess. Players loved it, reviewers love it. I'm really excited to bring it back, and people outside of the US really love it, which is awesome to see. And that's also international shipping is going to be part of the Kickstarter, so that's also why I'm really excited to have it launching on September 13th. Can't say that date enough. But one thing that having that Necromolds, the first print of Necromolds, be so successful really opened up for me was the ability to collaborate with other creators. And I'll talk a little bit about some of those collaborations tonight, but I've been able to bring on different graphic designers and artists and people that that I know as friends, and I also know as they are very talented artists. And to be able to kind of work with them and pay them for their time and talents has been really kind of personally rewarding for me. And they're the reason why we've been able to kind of get all this stuff made within a year's time. So I'm excited to be able to do even more of that. So let's jump into Necromolds and talk a little bit about some of the new stuff. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to add it in the chat. And I'm going to try to, I've got the chat up on my screen, so I'm going to try to be responsive. But sometimes I can get caught up and the question might get buried. And if it does, I'll be sure to go back through the chat and try to answer the questions later. So most of you know, and I'll kind of repeat some of the core gameplay mechanics here, because I know that some people are just looking for the reprint, right? And the game's totally new to them. So I'm going to repeat a few of the base mechanics, and then we'll get into the, then we'll get into the expansion mechanics. And I will upload this video to YouTube, so I'll be sure to do that. All right, so in Necromolds monster battles, right, each player gets a set amount of clay, and you use that clay to make your monster army, and you're making that monster army with a ton of little monster spellbooks, which we have a bunch of different monster spellbooks that players get to choose from if my camera decides to pull focus. Let's see if it does. Hey, there it is. Everything's still working. Good. So you've got all these cool little spellbooks. Inside each spellbook is the monster mold. All the monster stats are on the back of the spellbook. Let me back that up a little bit to get better light. So all the monster stats are on the back of the spellbook. There we go. And of course, the size of the monster affects the bigger the monster, the stronger the monster, but of course it uses more clay, right? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make the big old Insectomite, one of my favorite monsters. And those are new dice designs that you are seeing on the table. That's true. The camera knows that Batadactyl is the fastest Necromold in Series 1. So I am not surprised that it's a little jealous and does not want to cooperate. All right, so there we go. We've got our little Insectomite there. I'll set him, there we go. There's our focus plane. Thank you, Canon. So there's a little Insectomite. So as I'm sure most of you know, you make your monster armies, then you're rolling your command dice, which are these little dice here, to do things like, here, let me see, there we go. To do things like move, make a ranged attack, activate your magic ability, or finally we have the wild side, your choice. So we've got those command dice that you're assigning to the back of your spellbook, which we'll put little Insectomite spellbook there. So you throw those on the back of your spellbook, and that's how you assign your commands. And then during the game, you're moving, you're shooting, you're making ranged attacks, you're using your distance tool. Eventually, you get in combat. Somebody wins, somebody loses, somebody gets smashed. I'm not going to smash that guy yet, but I will let's make a little mud mum while I talk here. Eventually, somebody gets smashed, and last monster standing wins the game. So let's go like this. So, expansion time. So in Necromolds Call to Arms, which one of the reasons we called it Call to Arms is because this Kickstarter kind of is a call to arms for everybody who wants to see Necromolds succeed. Because, like the first Kickstarter, this would have all been impossible to do without your support. So, Necromolds Call to Arms. The first most important thing about Necromolds Call to Arms is that we're introducing a whole bunch of lore, which is going to be a whole lore book. It's a 30-page lore book that's going to be part of the new Battle Box print. So the new battle box printing is going to feature a 30-page lore book with some really cool illustrations, a lot of backstory, and part of that new backstory is a whole host of new characters. And of course, this character, whom you're all familiar with, is Basalt LeSueur, kind of our commander or the master of the molds. And Basalt LeSueur has a whole history that you'll read about in this lore book that we're making. So in the new expansion, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be selecting your Necrocaster. This is the character that you are embodying in the game as you take to the battle map. So of course there's Basalt LeSueur. Netch is a new character of the Gravestone Fellowship. Igneous, Stonefather of the Quarry. Then we have Hirana, who's the goddess of the Azatopal. And then finally, or not finally, we've got Ramilda, the lost child of perdition. And we have Mira, who's the supreme keel of the deep water. And one thing with the lore book, to answer Jacob's question, he's wondering, is the lore book exclusive to the battle box, or is it just a general Kickstarter toss-in? So the new lore book is going to be included inside each battle box. And that lore book is going to talk about kind of the history of all these characters, the faction, the world of the Necromolds. So that's all part of the new battle box, that lore book. But if you already own the battle box, and maybe you were an original Kickstarter backer, maybe you bought the battle box when it was on our website, or you bought it at your local game store. If you back the campaign for the expansion and above, you're going to get a copy of that lore book for free. So basically, during the checkout process in Backer Kit, you'll be able to tell me, hey, I already own the battle box, so I grabbed the expansion, and I'd love a copy of the lore book. And I'm going to give you a copy of that lore book for free with your pledge. So that'll kind of be a toss-in for those who already own the battle box, and then anyone who is buying the battle box for the first time, it's going to be included because I think the lore is such a cool part of board games, and I personally love lore. And I know one thing, we had a number of kids who, even the little bit of lore that was inside the rule book, they basically read it like a comic book, right? Like lay on the bed, flip through it, look at all the pictures. And I think that's so cool. So I want to see even more of that. So we've added even more lore. Let's see. So Mark had a quick question. Yeah, so you won't miss anything from the original Kickstarter with the reprint. So the only thing that was in the original Kickstarter that will not be made again are those exclusive glitter caster rings. So those won't be made again. They were part of the first Kickstarter. Everything else is going to be reavailable. So we're trying to reprint all the monster expansion boxes, the battle boxes, and the brand new stuff, as well as our deluxe distance tool. We're going to make more of these too. And this time we're going to do them in a new color. So we figured we're doing a second print of these. We might as well pick a new fun plastic color. So I think I'm going to go with like a slime green for the second print of these deluxe distance tools. But I still have to play around with some plastic samples. And while I'm on the topic, this is going to be a little scatterbrained, I think this stream is, but bear with me and we'll get through it all. While we're on the topic of Kickstarter exclusives, and there'll be a reward, a little bit of like a surprise at the end of the stream for sticking around with me. So you'll want to stick around. Talking about Kickstarter exclusives. So one other cool thing I'm excited about in the new Kickstarter is there will be exclusives for backing this time around. So just like last time, there's going to be a 48-hour backer exclusive. So if you get in the first 48 hours, as a thank you, you're going to get a cool freebie. And if we can fully fund in 48 hours, just like last time, everybody will get that freebie because of your support. The other thing is there's going to be some other cool exclusives. They're not gameplay mechanic based. They're totally visual, so you don't have to worry about missing out on any mechanics or anything like that. But we are going to have some really cool exclusives for those who go all in on the full pledge if they're new to Necromolds, or if they go all in on the new stuff because they already own the battle box and they already own the old stuff. So there's going to be a lot of reasons, whether you're a brand new backer or you're one of our previous backers, there's going to be a lot of reasons to return to help us fund this campaign. All right, so let us continue. You've got your Necrocasters, right? There's Mira. So one of the most important decisions you have to make is who are you going to play as in the battle? So we've got 6 different Necrocasters total, and they each represent a different faction. So, we have the Deepwater. Like I said, we've got Perdition. And then, of course, we have Basalt Lasur, who's factionless. So they each have a different faction, and right now the factions are all flavor, but it is something that's going to be built up upon with later expansions that we're kind of building up to with our roster of spellbooks. I'm going to come back to these and describe a little bit about what you're seeing on the card in a second. Because the next most important thing in Necromolds, I should put this clay away before it dries out on me so I can keep using it tonight. So the next most important thing in the expansion is you've got these spirit cards. And essentially, and this is kind of all part of the lore, but the Gravestone Fellowship, which is kind of a necromantic, they study the dark arts, right? The Gravestone Fellowship, and their leader is Netch. And one thing that they discovered early on in the Necromold Wars is that not all soul energy is created equal. And soul energy is what you're using your caster ring to basically bring the Necromolds to life, right? So you're using your caster ring to instead of putting your own soul into a golem, you're using the soul energy from Perdition and using it to fuel the golems. And all of this is in our lore book. And what the Gravestone Fellowship discovered is that not all souls are created equal, and that by finding old relics of war, like the giant sling that I have right here, by finding old relics of war and equipping them into the Necromolds during the summoning process, you can actually pull out those specific spirits from Perdition to empower your army. And those spirits then power your Necromold army. Whoa, hello, focus. Let's see if we can bring it back. There we go. And each of those characters, there's 6 spirit characters total, and each one also has its own effect in the game. So each one is different. So deciding on which spirit you're going to use to power your Necromold army is pretty important at the beginning of the expansion. And with each of these characters, they also come with an item. So they also come with an equipment card. And you can see I've got a little pile of them right here. And there's 7 equipment or artifacts total in the expansion. And each equipment card also has its own little ability. And with that equipment card, it also has its own little toy, right? So this one's the Crystal Sword, who's part of the Soul Reaper spirit card, which is kind of a character that lives in the world of Perdition where the souls live. So you can see we've got the little sword there. And this is one of the items that you're actually going to put into your new Necromold monsters. So we'll give that sword to our little mud mump there. So now our mud mump is armed with the Crystal Sword. And now that mud mump basically this specific mud mump gains the abilities of the Crystal Sword, which I'll read this one quick. We'll see if it makes sense. Oh, this will make sense in a little bit. So the Crystal Sword, for each gem symbol you roll in combat, you get to roll an additional weak die. So we can talk about the dice in a second. So you're picking your Necrocaster, you're choosing a spirit to power your Necromold army using your caster ring, and then because you've powered it with the spirit of a hero, you're equipping it with our little artifacts, so the little artifacts in the game. This one's the giant sling, which is a sculpt I'm really excited about, and I should say that Sean from Metal King Studios, I'm trying to find the link, actually did all of the artifact sculpts for us. So again, a really cool collaboration, and we're going to look at, especially I think after the campaign when I have a little more time, some really cool ways we can maybe integrate his world of Relic Blade with the world of Necromolds. So there's the giant sling. All right, so we've got our Necromold armed. Let's talk about some of the other mechanics. All right, so during the game, I'm going to give the stone shield I'm going to give to Insectomite here. So I'm going to arm my Insectomite with the stone shield, and that also gives Insectomite some specials during combat. So as all of you know, the weapons aren't translucent. The weapons are actually, at least these ones, are kind of like a metallic plastic is what I'm going for. So all of it could change during the manufacturing process, but that is our target, is kind of like it's like a metallic blue color for the artifacts. Kind of like a spirit blue. So in the base game, we've got our combat dice, right? And for most of you know, we've got the little blast symbols for hits. We've got the gem symbols where you collect your gems. And then we also, of course, have our defense symbol, our little shield for defense dice. So let's talk about what's new. So in the new expansion, we're adding a whole new set of combat dice. And these are called weakened dice. And essentially, weakened dice, just like their name, are a weakened version of the combat dice. So instead of being an 8-sided die, let me just hold one of these. Instead of being an 8-sided die, it's only going to be a 6-sided die. And the 6-sided die has a worse odds of succeeding. So it's going to have worse odds of succeeding. So there's, the symbols are just distributed a little differently. And the weak die also introduces a healing symbol. So you can see on the weak die there, we've got this little heart healing symbol. So you might wonder, well, what does that do? And that is how I will introduce to you the wound system, which is one of the coolest parts about the Call to Arms expansion. So and this is actually, for those who have played, you might know that Insectomite can be a beast. You can take down Insectomite. Its defense dice are good, but if it flubs a defense roll and loses all that clay, that's a huge loss for an Insectomite. But it's got really good defense. And there are other monsters like this as well. Especially Petropod against a ranged army can be super deadly. So one of the new mechanics that is in the game is the wound system. And the wound system uses wound markers, which you can see right here. I have one of them, to track the wound status of the monsters. So during the game, let's say these two, I should have picked a different clay color, but we'll say these two are enemies, right? These two are going to battle each other. They roll their combat dice, and the mud mump will say loses, right? How tragic. I'm going to smash it. I haven't smashed a monster yet on the stream, so let's go for it. Yes. Let's see. Oh, yeah, the skull ring. Nice. So, mud mump lost combat. During the combat, each player is rolling this die, which is also new, and this is the champion die. And the champion die is rolled every time, or almost every time, your monsters get in combat. And this has special abilities on it. Like you can see this symbol right here actually matches the symbol that you might have seen earlier on the soul card. So we'll let our focus catch up to us. There we go. So you can see that symbol matches. And again, everything you're seeing is handmade prototypes, right? So certainly not the final manufactured product. But you can see I've got a soul card right here with the Soul Reaper, who came with the crystal sword. So whenever this symbol is rolled, it pops off this ability. And on this specific character, it means that the monster either deals 1 wound to any unwounded, friendly or enemy monster in close distance, or I'm trying to read it on the screen. It's kind of weird. I'm just going to look at the card. Or it gives you a defense and a gem, right? So you kind of have a choice there whenever that symbol is rolled. There are some other symbols on this die too. One of them being the wound symbol, and that's this little dagger symbol right there. And whenever you roll that wound symbol, that means that you have left your enemy with a wound. And that means you get to take this little wound dagger. I'm going to pick up Insectomite. You get to take the little wound dagger and stick it into your mini. And there we go. Now we have a wounded Insectomite. And during the game, it's super easy to count how many wounds each unit has because you'll see the little sword sticking right inside of them. Welcome, Patty. So here we go. We've got our wounded Insectomite. So what does that wound mean? Well, that wound means that next time Insectomite rolls its crazy defense die, which are 4, right? It's got 4 defense dice. Well, because this Insectomite's wounded, one of those dice has to be a wounded die. So you're going to swap out one of your standard combat dice with a wounded combat die. So it's a really elegant and clean system that really self-balances the game in a really fun way, which lets you focus your strategic energies on your Necrocaster board, which I'll bring back on the screen. So you've got your Insectomite there. It's armed with one of these soul artifacts. It's taken 1 wound. We've talked about the wound dice. So and wound stack too, right? So that Insectomite might survive another combat, but it might take another wound, which means I get to jab another little sword into it. And now that Insectomite has 2 wounds, so half of its dice are wounded. And the more wounds there are, the odds are that Insectomite is eventually going to lose combat and get smashed. And David's asking about different sword designs, and we actually we've already modeled up some really cool additional wound sword designs. And I'll show a few of those off. And these are stretch goals in the Kickstarter, so I will give that away. Because they just cost extra money to tool them out, and it just increases our plastics cost and tooling cost. So we've added these as stretch goals because the game functionally works totally well with just one wound marker type, but I would like to add even more. So I'm hoping we can do that via stretch goals because we've got this long sword. I'm gonna turn this Insectomite into a little porcupine. So we've got our long sword, which I'm gonna stick into Insectomite. Then we also have, it's kind of like a spear, essentially. So we've got like this spear or like a stylized pike that I'll stick into Insectomite as well. There's no way this Insectomite would ever live through all this. Then we have just like a short sword. So a little short sword there, which I'll stick in. And then finally, we've got this one right here, which is kind of like this really brutal looking axe, which I wish it would, come on camera. Boy, focus tracking on this is super slow. I wonder why it's being so dysfunctional. I wonder if its focal point is somewhere weird. There we go. All right. So you can see we've got this really gnarly looking axe that we can use to stick into the unit as well. So now we've got this little porcupine. Let's see. I'm going to track. There we go. We'll track that. So now we've got this little porcupine of an Insectomite. There's no way this Insectomite would live through combat. And of course, like I said, the wounded die does have a heal symbol on it, right? So during the game, this Insectomite, if it does survive combat, it's going to heal up some wounds potentially. So the combat dice, or the weakened combat dice, if you survive your combat, basically give you a 50-50 chance of healing 1 wound. So you might survive the combat and get to remove 1 of your wounds. And we've designed the odds of that dice to really be balanced. So you're not sticking and removing wounds, nonstop during the game, which would get really distracting. It happens really just enough where you get the satisfaction of doing it while still being able to play the game and keeping the game experience and the play time to what it is in the battle box, which is like a 30 to 45 minute game. All right. So let's keep moving. So we've talked about the artifact system. We've talked a little bit about the wound mechanics, which, like I said, the wound mechanics are great for those, especially when you're getting towards the end of the game, when you have some stronger monsters left on the board. You can kind of use ranged attacks to try to pick away at the defense of those monsters, so then you can go in with melee characters and try to take them out. So there's a lot of strategies that have been added to the game experience just by this really elegant wound mechanic system. And it just introduces a ton of new toys that you get to play with while you're playing with your monster army. And who really needs more of an excuse than that? All right, so let's go ahead and make our Batadactyl quick. I'll make Batadactyl out of a purple clay. So I'm going to go ahead and do that quick. I'll switch the camera over because then you're not just staring at a whole bunch of nothing. There we go. All right, there we go. I'm back. All right, so I'm going to make a Batadactyl out of purple clay. While I do this, feel free to add any questions in the chat. I'm sure I've missed questions, and like I said, I'll get back to them. Or if you're still hanging out here, feel free to just re-ask your question, and hopefully I'll see it in the chat, and I'll answer it for you. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and make a Batadactyl. And I'm also like in between office spaces, which is my office is like a little, it's a little empty. So I'm hoping once I'm in my more permanent space, I can have a better stream setup. Maybe eventually I'll get one of those fancy like Livestream button press devices. That would be cool. All right. Here we go. Batadactyl. I've got my Batadactyl made. And let's see. We've got a few questions here. So Dan's asking about some additional game boards. And some more look and find style game boards. And I definitely, in the future, I do want to keep the look and find style of Necromolds battle maps the same, because I think I love it. So, and even some of the other, we try to hide little things in the other illustrations too. Like, eventually I'll bring them out tonight, but some of the new terrain pieces we have a fun little illustrations all over. And so there's still plenty of like little fun things to see, but I think once we get to Series 2, that's when I want to really expand on the battle map, have bigger battle maps. I've got some other really cool ideas I want to explore for new ways to build the map that you are fighting on. So there's some really exciting things that I'm excited to explore, which all kind of hinge on this Kickstarter being successful. So I won't lie, this Kickstarter has me more nervous than the first Kickstarter. Because the first Kickstarter was, will it succeed or not? And if it wasn't, it was kind of like, all right, like I'll keep doing my thing. But this is kind of like, this is okay. The first one succeeded and people like it. So can we build it into something really exciting? Because we have a lot of ideas. So this Kickstarter actually has me a bit more nervous, which is also why September 13th. It's nice to have a date that I can kind of hold myself accountable to now that we have all of our pricing info and all of the information I've been working on with our manufacturers and freight partners over the last month or so. All right, a few more questions, then we'll keep going about the expansion. All right, so Jacob is asking about, let me scroll back up. Oh, the Basalt Fortress. We'll see. So we already have a pretty robust list of stretch goals that I would prioritize before the Basalt Fortress. But if we blow through those stretch goals, I still think there's probably an even cooler way. I need to explore it a little bit more. I think there's probably an even cooler way to do the Basalt Fortress kind of clay measurement tool to have even more utility than just being a way to measure your clay. Maybe we give it stats. Maybe it comes in its own little cool mechanic. Does each wizard have their own little fortress piece that you can pull clay from? So I don't know. These are just things off the top of my head. I think there's a lot of cool stuff there. So if we can blow past the first list of stretch goals, I think that would be something fun to add on to. Whether it's included in the Kickstarter cost, probably not, because we wouldn't know what that thing would cost, but it would enable us to make it. So then when we do ship the Kickstarter, it could be available on our website as an add-on. All right. And then I'll go for a few more questions here, and then we'll get into the Necrocaster boards. All right, let's see. Oh yeah, so Patty's asking about the shipping climate. Let's see. Yeah, so I have looked at that a little bit, kind of some domestic solutions. And even though the shipping, luckily I think shipping is more reliable now than it was when we were fulfilling originally. Unfortunately, there's only a few freight companies, and they kind of like how high freight costs are, and they've figured out that creators like me and bigger companies kind of just have to pay the prices and try to figure out how to make it work. And it's kind of a bummer, but at least we know that things are shipping on time now, so the delays aren't as bad as they were, but the pricing is still pretty high for freight and fulfillment. But with that said, we have looked at a few domestic solutions, and at the current scale of Necromolds, it still makes better sense to kind of be manufacturing overseas and freighting everything, especially because we have a lot of customers in Europe and customers in the UK, Australia, and just all over the world. So being able to ship from overseas just happens to make more sense at this time. All right. Let's see. I'm going to, so then last question, Will asked about the price point, which is a great question. So the battle box for this print run, or not this print run, the battle box is going to be priced at, let me see. I'm going to pull open my little pledge chart here. All right, there it is. Okay, so the battle box is priced at $59.99, or Kickstarter doesn't let you do numbers like that, so $60. But we've tried to build in even more value in the battle box by adding this whole new lore book inside. But obviously from where we were 3 years ago in the Kickstarter to where we are now, the whole landscape's changed a bit. So one of the things I've really been working on with our manufacturers is trying to make sure that we do this Kickstarter in the smartest way we can, both manufacturing and just manufacturing and shipping efficiency-wise, in order to keep the prices what I think the product is really valued at. So that's kind of why it's taken so long to pick a date, because I've been working on those types of questions with our manufacturer. But anyways, so $59.99 for the battle box that includes everything you need to play the game, plus the all-new lore book that's inside. And again, that lore book will be free for anyone who already owns the battle box, as long as they back the Kickstarter. Then there's also the expansion. So the expansion is going to run $40, and there's a whole lot of goodies in this expansion, which I've only scratched the surface of. So as I keep talking, I'll show off a few more of those things. Then there's also the monster packs. So the monster packs are priced at $24.99, and those include, the 2 spell books, the clay, also a caster ring inside the box. And those are really our main product line. So yeah, the battle box, the monster packs, and the expansion. And then there's going to be a bunch of different pledge levels that you can get in at too. So if you already own the battle box and you just want to grab some monster packs, there'll be a monster pack level. And then there'll also be just different pledge levels that scale up from there. And the all-in pledge levels are bundles, right? So if you want the expansion and the new monster packs, you're going to save money by going in for the all-in level for all the new stuff, or if you're brand new to Necromolds, just everything. And there will be exclusives, like I said. I'm not going to spoil what the exclusives are, but there will be some fun exclusives for those who help us make this campaign a success. All right, so let us keep moving. I'm going to move this light. When I started the stream, the sun was up, and now it started to go down. So I'm going to get my light on my tabletop a little brighter and get back into some of the new expansion stuff. So like I said, the expansion is $40, and there's a lot of fun stuff packed in there, which let's talk about the Necrocaster boards. All right, so here we go. Whoops, wrong button. Oh, good question, Michael. So Michael asks about if we ended up losing money because of all the headaches that we ran into with the first Kickstarter. So that's a great question. So luckily, I did not lose money on the first Kickstarter, which I'm really happy about, and for me, that's a huge success. The freight issues we ran into with freight, going up by a crazy percentage, really ate into what would have been the profits of the first print run. And those profits would have really helped us get a second printing underway without going back to Kickstarter. And unfortunately, they got kind of pulled out from underneath us because of the freight and shipping, kind of the worldwide shipping crisis. But that is why I'm excited about this Kickstarter, this upcoming Kickstarter, because looking over what happened last time, from everything I've been learning from our freight experts, is things have really leveled off, and we have a little more of an expectation of, unless the world changes again, who knows. But I feel like we weathered that first Kickstarter really well, and I'm trying to build a little more safety nets into this Kickstarter to make sure that if we do have any unforeseen headaches arise, that we'll be able to financially weather that storm, push through it, and hopefully on the other side still end up somewhere where we can just keep reprinting, we can make new monster packs, and Necromolds can be a production, a game production company, a self-sustaining game production company. That's the big goal with this, because then we can make a lot of this new stuff that we've been talking about, like tabletop RPG stuff and a co-op expansion and a lot of these ideas that I really want to kind of hit the gas on. All right, here we go. Necrocaster boards. Let's talk a little bit about, we'll go Romilda. Romilda's an awesome character. Unfortunately, so these are the handmade prototypes, and things at the Gen Con booth got a little crazy. So unfortunately, some of the handmade prototypes got a little bit beat up from this set. But Romilda's still looking clean. All right, so we've got the Romilda player board here. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we're looking at on these player boards. So obviously, we've got our character illustration there. All that lore will be in the lore book. And again, this is your leader that you're running your army as. And each leader has 3 abilities. One of them is common for all of the different leaders, like March. And then there's also 2 unique abilities that are special to this character. So every character has 2 unique abilities that change the way that they interact with the board, the combat dice, and just how they try to strategically take advantage of what's happening in the game. And so a lot of the player's abilities are centered around things like the wound symbol or the healing symbol. So you can see Romilda has an ability called Mud Ritual. And what that does is that you do it before rolling your combat dice, and you can do it whether you're doing melee, ranged attack, or defense. So before you roll your combat dice, you can cast Mud Ritual. And Mud Ritual lets you re-roll a combat die for each wound symbol, or for each wound in an enemy or ally's results. So that means that if I roll 2 wound symbols on my commander die, wherever I set that, there it is. Here we go, this will help. So that means like, hey, if I roll these 2 wound symbols, that means that I get to re-roll 2 different combat dice because I cast Mud Ritual. And then, like I said, each ability has its own way it affects the game. So how are you paying for these abilities? Well, the Necrocasters are never going to put themselves in harm's way, right? They have golem armies to fight out their disputes. They're not going to be down on the battlefield themselves. But what they will do is they're going to use an enchanted war banner, which we have right here, which acts as a conduit. If the camera wants to show you, come with me. There we go. All right. So we've got the enchanted. I bet I could change my autofocus settings. I'll remember that for next time. So we've got our enchanted war banner, and this banner is how you choose your champion in the game. So I've got a Batadactyl here that I've made. So at the beginning of the game, one of the important things, like you probably saw in the trailer, is you choose your champion, and you choose them by sticking them with your war banner. And now I've basically marked on the board that this Batadactyl is my champion. And that means whenever I cast those spells of my Necrocaster, they are cast through my champion. So I'll put Batadactyl there, and let's make I'm going to make one more little monster here. Where's my purple clay? There it is. And then I'll kind of show you how the Necrocaster board interacts with the characters on the table. And I think one thing I'm most proud of with this expansion is that it adds a lot of really cool stuff and a lot of really neat strategies to the game without adding to the mental load. I think one thing that I love the most about Necromolds is that the mental load is really, really low. It's all physical. You're making monsters, you're smashing monsters, you're rolling dice. Everything is there, and if you just gave a kid the tools of the game and asked them how the game was played, they would probably get to 80 or 90% of the actual rules just by playing with the toys. And so that low mental load and really the ease of teaching somebody how to play carries through with this expansion. And I think that makes it a huge success, especially because it adds so many new strategies to the game and new physical kind of like interactions with the wound dice. All right, I made myself a little Grave Ghoul, so I'm going to throw him right there. So Grave Ghoul is my buddy. Oh, here. Oh, this is perfect. All right, so we've got our hideous-looking Insectomite there, and then we've got our Batadactyl, who's a commander, and then we've got Grave Ghoul. So for example, earlier I was talking about Mud Ritual. So on the commander board, there are the abilities, right? Your 3 abilities, and then there's a power track on the far left side of the board. And during the game, you're spending power. You start at 3. Every once in a while, you gain power, but you're spending power to do your abilities. And the cost of those abilities depends on how close or far away you are from the unit that you're targeting. So if I wanted to cast Mud Ritual on, let's say Grave Ghoul was going to get into combat with Insectomite, right? So Grave Ghoul has decided to take on this hideously wounded Insectomite. Well, if my Batadactyl wants to cast Mud Ritual on Grave Ghoul before combat, it just depends on the distance. So right now I'm a close distance away, which means it would only cost me 1 power to cast Mud Ritual. Whereas if my commander was further back, let's say I was a medium distance, well, it's actually going to cost me 2 power now because I'm a medium distance away. And then finally, there's the far distance, which costs 3 power. So, maybe we'll go back here. Maybe I'm a far distance away. And of course, you still need to be in line of sight. And then if you're beyond a far distance, you're just out of range to cast that spell. So the closer you are, the cheaper it is to cast your spells. But there's a risk, which Dan kind of just asked about when he asked about if the commander gets taken out. So whenever your champion is on the board, right, that means every time you're in combat, you get to roll the champion die, which lets you do things like wound, use your special abilities, stuff like that. So whenever your champion's on the table, you get to roll the champion die, which gives you these bonuses, these benefits for having this leader on the board, giving your Necromolds orders. Let's see. And then, what was I going to say? Oh, yeah. So let's say your commander loses, right? So the power cost is determined by how close your commander is to the unit it's trying to cast upon. But obviously, the closer you are to things like combat, you put your commander at risk. So if for somehow, let's say, if this Insectomite, took out Grave Ghoul and then came at my commander and managed to defeat my commander, the commander gets smashed and is off the board, right? So we'll just tip him over for now, so I can keep using them for demonstrations. So the commander is now off the board. So now I have to wait till the next round to choose another commander. So I can't choose a new commander until it's the next round. And at the start of the next round, on my turn, I get to now pick a different unit in the game to be my commander and stick my banner in that unit. But you only get 2 commanders. So you only get 2 commanders. And once your second commander's destroyed, you've lost the game. So the expansion adds a whole new win mechanic and a whole new level of strategy to how you might decide to try to win the game. And one of the things that has come up in some of the play tests I've done is the idea that, let's say you're in a game, right, and you're losing, and you can kind of see the writing on the wall. Like, that that the odds are now against you because of some poor matchups or just some poor dice rolls earlier in the game. You might decide to just put your army into destroying the enemy's units or the enemy's commander. So now that enemy's commander has a big target on its back because you know that the only way you're really going to achieve victory is by going at the commander. And that's happened in some of our playtests, which are really cool. Necromold still oftentimes comes down to 1 versus 2 units or relatively pretty close games. But now there's this new mechanic that you can try to take advantage of to really undercut your enemy and try to steal that victory away from them by taking out their commander twice. Let's see. And back to the commander boards here. Every time, the first time your commander is smashed, it activates this little ability at the bottom called Last Stand. And the Last Stand is the ability that your Necrocaster automatically pops off the first time that champion is destroyed. And the Last Stand ability is very powerful. So sometimes you might put your commander out in harm's way just to activate your Last Stand ability. So there are strategic reasons why you might want to try to off your commander just to activate the Last Stand. So for example, Ramilda's Last Stand is Portal Step. And what Portal Step does is at the start of your next turn, swap the position of any 2 friendly monsters and gain 1 power. So that means, and this is actually, I've used this before, it's a lot of fun. That means, let's say you have a Mud Mump, which is really fast, right? And you've raced it across the board. When you activate your Last Stand ability as Ramilda, you can now swap that Mud Mump with a big slow unit like Lethydra, who has 3 ranged attack shots. So you can swap the Mud Mump with Lethydra and then just blast your enemy's units with ranged attacks. So there's some really cool possibilities you can do by activating your Last Stand. Of course, you can only activate your Last Stand once, because the second time your commander gets smashed, you get squished. And then, yeah, I saw a few questions about the kind of the plastics that these are going to be made out of. So the plastics are going to be a flexible plastic, kind of like our Deluxe Distance tool, where they're going to be solid enough where you can properly stick them into your monsters, but they're going to be flexible enough where you don't accidentally poke yourself, and they're not they're not so rigid that they accidentally get broken. And you probably could smash the unit with those plastics in them because those new plastics are flexible. But we did design the game so that even pulling these little wounds out happens really naturally. So one of the things we were worried about early on was like, oh, is it going to be too cumbersome to be constantly sticking wounds into dudes and then removing wounds and then sticking them back in, and then when you go to smash them, you got to pull them back out. So that was a concern we had early on in the development of this expansion. And luckily, we specifically designed the wound mechanic system and the wounding mechanic system on the commander die. We mathematically kind of balanced that. So you're using these mechanics of wounding and healing, but not at such a degree where it feels really irritating. So that was something we were very conscious about when we were designing and balancing this rule set for the expansion. So even with the hard plastics, when we play test, it's never irritating or a concern to pull these things out to squish. But the final manufactured versions will be a flexible plastic, both for safety as well as you could squish it and they're not going to break. There's probably a little more cleanup because they get embedded with the clay. But hey, that's what home rules are for, right? So I'm sure there's some fun we can plan around instances like that. Let's see what else there is. So we have the Last Stand ability. You've got your 2 commanders. The second time your commander gets smashed, you're out of the game. You're defeated. And then there is a little marker you can see on the player boards too. We do have little tracks, right? So there'll be like a little token that you can use to kind of track your power scale. There'll be little tokens for the Last Stand ability. The artwork on here is, I'd say, like 80 to 90, probably like 80% done. There's still some more things we want to do with illustrating behind the Last Stand ability and adding a few more fun illustrations to our player boards. And then finally, there's rerolls. So each champion has its own reroll pool of 3 rerolls, and there's no way to get these back in the game. So each player starts with 3, and you, as the Necrocaster, determine when you get to use these rerolls. And these rerolls can only be used by your champion. So your champion is going to be, closer to combat, right? Let me put my little banner back in Batadactyl. Your champion's going to be closer to combat because you're in there and you're casting spells and you're amplifying your other monsters to hopefully give them an advantage in the combats that they are in. Or you're doing things like March, which March lets you move another friendly unit, right? So I could cast March I'll show you right here. So like Insectum or Grave Ghoul's right there. I could cast March because I'm close. It's only going to cost me 1 power. And now I get to march that unit a close distance. So there's all the mechanics around these Necrocaster boards are really around strategic placement and mobility of units, and also healing and wound mechanics, and using the new wounded dice. So there's a lot of cool flavor that are all on those boards. And I know that somebody's asking about the caster rings, and definitely check out, maybe somebody could post it to the comments, or just look on our YouTube page. If you look on the Necromolds YouTube page, you will see how to, no, I don't have one in front of me. You can see how to resize your caster ring. Luckily, the caster ring, the caster rings are designed for kids. And if my camera wants to play nice, the caster rings are designed for kids. But luckily, this one fits on my child-sized pinky finger. But there are ways to resize your caster ring. So it looks like Nico just posted it into the comments section there on how to resize your caster ring. And it works. It works. I've got my own adult-sized caster rings that I use when I actually play. And I think they're back in my ring box. I have a display box of all my caster rings. All right, so I'm trying to think last things. So I think that's a really, I think, a good overview of the new mechanics. All 6 of the spirits, kind of the souls that you're powering your army with, they have different abilities. All of the artifacts in the game have different abilities, like the Feather Swift Axe. Lets that character actually cancel combat and move past the combat. So the weapons do really fun things to kind of shake up the strategy and the gameplay without, like I said, adding more mental load to the game. And I think the final thing with the expansion is that I haven't talked about yet are the new terrain pieces. So I'm going to move these little dudes to the side and bring up these terrain pieces to give you all a closer look. And then after the terrain pieces, I've got one other fun thing to show off, and then I think that's really it. And then I'll stick around and answer a few more questions before I sign off. Because again, it's the first live stream I've done in 8 months. And it's fun to be back on the camera and to show off all this stuff outside of Gen Con. Being at Gen Con was awesome because I got to kind of pitch Necromolds to a lot of people who had never seen it before. But it's fun to be able to pitch all the new stuff to you all who have been waiting for this Kickstarter over the last 8 months. All right, so Mausoleum. Let's bring the Mausoleum in. So part of the new expansion are these constructible 3-dimensional terrain pieces that we collaborated with TinkerTurf, which let me find their link. So Tinkerhouse makes a line of products called TinkerTurf. I'm just going to pop their link over here because they make some really cool stuff. Lane and the Tinkerhouse team, their whole thing is 3D constructible terrain for wargaming. And I'm a really big fan of the stuff that they make. It's really high quality and it looks really, really cool. So I reached out to them to see if they would be interested in collaborating on some constructible 3D terrain that'll add even more board presence to the game. And this is all included in the expansion. So for $40, you're getting, there's some stuff that I haven't mentioned yet, but you're getting the wound markers, you're getting the banners, you're getting all the artifacts, all the cards, the Necrocasters, and you're also getting all these 3D printed or 3D constructed terrain pieces. So here's our Mausoleum. And again, this is just kind of the homemade prototype. And there's, I wish I had, let me see if I can shine a little light. There's even artwork in the Mausoleum, if you can see. Let's see if we can get some in there. I think I can see a little bit of the fountain in there. So inside the Mausoleum, there's a lot of little cool details to see and explore. And then, let's see. Oh, and of course, and then some of the pieces too, like the ground piece in the Mausoleum, I made double-sided, so you've got one that has like, you know, this character who has fallen in battle next to all of these scrolls, and who knows what kind of secrets are hidden inside there. Yes, that is correct. Yep, so the expansion will be $40. It includes this, you know, our 3D mausoleum. Then there's also another constructible piece that we have, which is these new barrier pieces, or a new barrier. So we've got this new barrier piece that you can use in battle and hide your dudes behind, you know, make ranged attacks over. There are, of course, home rules that we have in the battle box for things like hiding behind terrain. So by having, you know, a barrier piece like this that has a little more size and a little more presence to it, just kind of introduces a little more of those home rules of shooting from behind terrain. And it just adds to the board presence. So we've got the barrier piece, and then finally we've got this little it's like a sacrificial table, essentially. And this can actually, we sized it so when you build your mausoleum, you could put this inside the mausoleum. Let me adjust my focus here. There we go. So we made it so you could actually put this inside the mausoleum when you build it. But otherwise, let's see. And then, of course, our tabletop of our sacrificial board is also double-sided. So there's kind of a blank, clean version with some broken stone, and then there's the version that has bones and skulls and papers and a bunch of fun stuff there. And then we have these little artifacts on the sacrificial table, like this, almost like this mummified zombie hand, and then also an urn with who knows what's inside. Maybe what's inside helps power the Necromold monsters. Let me see if there's any other components to the... one component that I don't seem to have with me up here, which is part of the expansion. I'll just kind of mention it for those who are still joining. We still have 35 people who are hanging out, so that's awesome. Thank you for following along and sticking around tonight. One other piece that is part of the expansion that I haven't really shown off yet is there are objective markers in the expansion. And rules-wise, they're very, very light. But there's a lot, of course, you can do with your own home rules with them. But those little, they're essentially little tokens that you can place on the board at the start of the game and race toward and try to get. And they might give you power. They might give you a heal. They just, you know, on the bottom of the objective marker is kind of a different thing that it could do, as well as giving you an artifact. So the objective markers aren't something that I would say are part of the base rules, but they're probably more like part of the advanced rules. Or hey, once you've mastered the rules of the expansion, add objective markers to the mix, because objective markers really change up your early game strategy, because now you have these valuable tokens at the center of the board. So whereas before you might have played pretty conservative and used some bigger monsters, now you might want to have a few Batadactyls or some Mudmumps in your mix to race out there and try to get those objective markers. So that's also in this expansion too, which I'll show off more as we get closer to the Kickstarter. So before I show off kind of the last thing I've got planned for tonight, I'll take maybe just 5 minutes and answer some questions, and then maybe around like 8:20, at least 8:20 my time, then I'll kind of show off our last thing, and then we'll close the stream out at 8:30, so about 15 more minutes maximum. So yeah, so what questions do you all have? I'm sure there are questions that I missed that you put in the chat. And yeah, feel free to re-ask them if I haven't answered them yet. Otherwise, I'm sure I'll find them when I scroll back through the chat, over the next few days and answer any questions that I might have missed. Oh, great question. All right, so somebody asked how many new monster packs there are in the Kickstarter. So there are going to be there are 2 new monster packs and 4 new monsters. Plus, there's a new monster that's included in the expansion, and I'm not gonna show off that monster, but I'm really excited about it. So there are 5 new spellbooks total as part of this Kickstarter for those who already have everything from the first print in Series 1. There's 5 new monsters that you get to add to your roster of spellbooks, and each one just like, each spellbook is unique, right? And that's something that we've tried to be really deliberate with these new monsters, is to give each spellbook a reason for existing, right? There's a reason why you're going to want to use this new spellbook in your army because it does X, Y, and Z. But it doesn't overrule or kind of overpower any of the previous spellbooks. So, you're still going to be grabbing Batadactyl, you're still going to be grabbing Graveghoul, and all the other units from Series 1. You just have more options now with Series 1X, right? X for expansion. Let's see. Ryan's got a question. So Ryan's asking about distribution. So distribution is all going to depend on how well the Kickstarter does. So right now, the way that everything is shaking out is we're still going to offer retail. So we're going to still work directly with retailers to give them inventory. And the first time around, after the Kickstarter, the inventory we could only really support them with was the battle box because the monster pack margins weren't there yet for scale. But something I'm excited about is with this second printing, we've designed it in a way where we can both supply retailers with the battle box, the expansion, and all the monster packs. So we're still going to be working direct with retailers for this second printing. And if everything goes really, really well and we blow past our stretch goals, then we're going to be ordering at a quantity where distribution becomes more possible. So I'm trying to grow the game into distribution, and once it makes sense based on volume that we're ordering from the manufacturer, then we'll be able to dip our toes in the distribution channels. But right now, it's currently planned direct to retail based on our current Kickstarter goal. But I hope we blow past it because I have a lot of fun things I want to do and a lot of stretch goals I'm really excited to unlock. All right. Let me see. There's a few more questions that I missed, so I'm going to scroll up quick. Oh, yeah. Okay, so Jacob's asking about fitting the new spellbooks. So Jacob's wondering, the original battle box fits all of the Series 1 monsters, but we're adding, obviously, 5 new monsters to the game through this expansion and through this Kickstarter. So I've designed, and this is one of the stretch goals that's currently planned, and it's one of the earlier stretch goals, so I'm really hoping we hit it fast and then just blow past it, is I've designed the box in a way where we can have a larger box for the expansion, which will fit all 5 spellbooks. So you'll be able to, obviously once you start adding clay in a bunch of rings and stuff like that, you might have to get rid of your tray or just kind of reconfigure things a little bit inside the box to get everything in there. But the new box I really want to design to hold all 5 spellbooks, and we figured out how to do that in a way where the box still isn't crazy big. So you'll be able to hold all your spellbooks between the battle box and the new expansion box. And eventually, and again, this is one of those things where, just like the first print and the first Kickstarter, anything that goes beyond our stretch goals and just as extra funding in the game, I kind of pour myself and in that back into the Necromolds universe and the Necromolds products and design and development. And at some point, I really do want to have a cool modular storage solution that you can build and expand upon as we introduce new spellbooks and new caster rings and stuff like that. So I do want to do more kind of big storage solutions in the future. But in the meantime, I really hope that we can blow past that early stretch goal to make it so the expansion box can fit all these new spellbooks. All right, I'm going to scroll through a few more of these questions. Oh, yeah. So Dan's asking about how many wounds a monster can receive. So the game, actually, let me put these little monsters back on the table. They're like off camera, but they're fun to stare at because they got so many little plastic toys in them. So this Insectomite would not be game legal. Again, you can totally home rule it and just throw as many wounds in monsters as you want. But we've designed it so once a monster takes a 4th wound, it just gets smashed. So a monster could never have 4 wounds. So once it takes a 4th wound, it gets smashed. But statistically, most monsters aren't going to ever survive to 4 wounds. So that rule probably it's kind of more of an edge case rule in a way, because once you hit 3 wounds, your monster is either going to lose in combat or you're going to heal back up to 2 wounds. So it's very rare, almost, even in all our playtests, almost never we saw 4 wounds in a single monster. So there's a rule where, hey, once you take a 4th wound, that monster is just toast. Yeah, so Zach's asking about the total monster pack count. There will be 6 monster packs total. So Series 1 had, monster packs 1, 2, 3, and 4. And this new expansion print is going to introduce monster pack 5 and monster pack 6. Let's see. There will be there will be a backer kit. So one person's asking about post Kickstarter. So after the Kickstarter is over, there will be a backer kit where people can add other products. They can up their pledge or adjust their pledge. So we are going to have that post Kickstarter support. But with that said, obviously, the more we can do within the Kickstarter platform, just the better, right? The more stretch goals we pass, the more momentum we have, and the more momentum we have, the more new people who see the campaign on the Kickstarter homepage check it out and hopefully are sold and on board and kind of join our Necromolds community. Michael's asking about terrain packs, and I do want to do terrain packs in the future, and that's something that this is kind of part of this expansion is exploring ideas that I want to maybe expand upon in the future, like introducing even more artifacts to the game, introducing more buildable 3D terrain pieces. So this expansion includes a lot of ideas that I think could really be built upon in future expansions or in just miniature, almost like micro expansions, right? There's no reason we can't design a bigger battle map that comes with some really cool 3D buildable set pieces, right? Especially for those 4-player games. And that's something that I'm hoping, again, if the Kickstarter does well enough, I can jump straight into the development on and start working on my own. So then we can just release cool products like that. Let's see here. I'm going to scroll through a little bit more. Thank you all for hanging out and asking questions. And so there'll be, what are we at, 11 plus 5 new ones. So we're going to be at 16 spellbooks total. If we can fund this Kickstarter, there'll be 16 spellbooks total. And we've got a whole list of cool abilities for future spellbooks. So I really want to build on top of that. But I think this new expansion is going to add a lot of cool versatility to those monsters. I don't currently have, so Josh was asking about a flyer to hand out to get hyped for the Kickstarter. Actually, you know what? I do have, maybe feel free, Joshua, to send me a message, just a direct message to remind me. But I do have a little flyer that I created for, let me switch this back over. I have a flyer I created for Gen Con that would work really well. I wonder if I have one around. No. That would work really well to hand out to people. And it has a QR code on it that people can basically take a picture of or scan in order to join our mailing list. Let me keep scrolling through here. Castle Necromold, yes, that's the stretch goal that got away from the first campaign. But maybe it'll come back. I've got ideas. It's not currently listed on our current stretch goals. I will tell you that. I'll spoil that. But I do have ideas for things we could do with that idea and that mechanic. Yeah, so Aaron's asking about the lore book. And yes, the lore book that comes with the new battle box is it is a art book as well. So it's got a lot of cool art in it. And one of the stretch goals that we're hoping is to put even more art in it, right? So if we can get to a certain point in the campaign, that means that we have even more funds to put into, hiring Thad to do even more cool artwork for the Necromolds lore book. But that said, a lot of the Necromolds lore book is text. So, there are cool images here and there, but a lot of it's just story. And there's a lot of really cool story with our new characters, how they relate to each other, their histories, their personal goals. Maybe part of this might be I just finished, or I'm almost done with Attack on Titan. I've been on an Attack on Titan binge. And, in high school I was a big Naruto fan, Bleach. So when when Zane and I were working on writing the lore, and I was kind of thinking about the bigger story behind Necromolds, I've always pictured it as an anime. So the character intrigue and the matureness of the stories that you get out of anime are something that kind of influenced the story writing and the world building that we have inside the new lore book. All right, let me keep scrolling, and then I'll answer a couple more questions, and I'll show off the thing, and then I'll hang out and answer a few more questions. All right, so currently, that's a great question. Currently, so Zach asked about a deluxe option with like a hardcover lore book. I hadn't thought about that yet, but I will add it to my maybe list as far as maybe a stretch goal goes, because we'd want to do that at a certain volume. And that's something too, when I thought about like the tabletop RPG ideas that I know a few people have mentioned in the comments, I think what I want to do is take the lore from the battle box and maybe in the future expand upon it with maybe a 5th edition supplement. Or I haven't looked at D&D 1 yet, but I know they just announced that. But basically looking at like a D20 system supplement that you can take kind of the world of Necromolds, the characters, and actually use your spell books as golems in a tabletop RPG. So I think something like that would be the perfect opportunity to make a hardcover product, and give people who already own the lore book a reason to kind of go out and get this expanded, lore book and universe and game, and tabletop game. A coloring book would be super cool. We actually did that a little bit for the print and play from the first Kickstarter, is we gave people a black and white version for the print and play that some people colored. It was kind of like our little coloring book version. Necromolds will be at Gen Con next year. So Zach's asking about Origins and Gen Con. I haven't planned for Origins yet, but I can say that we have a booth for Gen Con in 2023. And I'm really excited to be back because when we're there next year, we'll hopefully have product. Now, if the Kickstarter doesn't fund, I don't know what I'm going to do with the booth. Maybe I'll sleep in the booth and that'll be my hotel room. But I have my fingers crossed, and I know that there's a lot of people really excited about helping kind of make this thing happen and helping add all these new little toys to Necromolds. So yes, Necromolds Gen Con 2023 is a go. Clay terrain in the future, I thought about it. There are some cool things we can do with clay, especially when it comes with terrain and stamping and stuff like that. So there's been a lot of kind of cool product ideas in the works. And I've missed a lot of questions, so I'm just going to scroll past a few. And I think what I'm going to do is, like I said, I'm going to go back through and answer any questions that I might have missed that hadn't gotten touched on in this stream. But since it's almost 8:30, I'm going to go ahead and show you kind of the final thing I wanted to show off this evening. And that is a sneak peek, and you're going to get a better look at this tomorrow morning when you check our Kickstarter, or when you check our Facebook page. And that is one of the new monsters. You can see I have a blank spell book here because this is a prototype book that I actually printed myself in kind of my home prototyping lab. And you can see there's a little bit of a monster mold in there. There it is. What do you think it is? I'm going to go ahead and make it. All right, so this is one of the 5 new monsters in the new expansion. I won't necessarily give out all of the monsters' details and stats yet, and some of that we're still kind of doing some final play testing on, but to make sure it's in balance with the other monsters. But let's go ahead and make this monster, and I'll show it off to the camera, and let's switch back over to our camera that doesn't want to focus for us. There we go. Wow, things have really gotten dark. Let's just put that right there. All right, here we go. And yeah, if you check our Instagram and our Facebook tomorrow morning, you'll get a good view of this dude. All right. And then I need a little more. Oh, you can kind of see him in the background there. A little more clay. Dun, 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 dun. Whoops. Actually, let me peel him out before I do the other little piece here. So again, these are my resin printed molds, which, as anyone who owns the battle box can attest to the, if you look at the difference between the 3D printed ones from the original prototypes to what we actually manufactured, the manufactured ones look super crisp. And I'm sure that's going to happen with this one as well. So let's see if our camera will let us focus. So here we go. Let me put this light over here. We've got, of course, it doesn't want to focus. Here we go. Ooh, let me see if I can bring my light up. So here we go. This is one of our 5 new Necromold monsters out of the 3D printed prototype, so not final manufactured quality. And this is, at least its working name is Magmass, is what I've been calling it. And Magmass is a volcano golem. So you can see on the back, we even have lava dripping off of Magmass, and we've got some tropical flowers there. And Magmass is this humanoid bulking golem that has a really cool ability where it's got this, the coolest thing with a volcano, right, is when the volcano blows its top. So Magmass has a special AoE ranged attack ability where each Magmass can only do it once, but when you do it, you actually blow the top of the volcano and you destroy that little piece. And then what you're left with is, a Magmass without a hat, essentially. But that's how you can track and make sure that, only a Magmass can only use that AoE ability once, and even without that AoE ability, it's still a really powerful Necromold unit that you're going to be using on the board. And it is a rock type golem, so it's part of the quarry. So we've got Magmass. I'm going to put him right there and smash him. And you're going to see a nice close-up image of Magmass tomorrow, along with Magmass's illustration. There we go, our smashed Magmass. Along with Magmass's illustration on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter tomorrow. So that is it. And that's, like I said, that's one of 5 new monsters that have all new abilities that you'll be able to employ, or I should say recruit, into your Necromold armies in order to defeat your rival Necrocasters and prove that you are the strongest Necrocaster in the Necromolds universe. I'm going to hang out just for a few more minutes and answer any questions you might have, because it's fun to, it's fun to chat with you all. I mean, it's been, like I said, a long time. It's been 8 months. I am going to take this jacket off, though, because I'm just like, I forgot how sweaty I get. And there's not a lot of airflow in this room right now. So I'm just like sitting in a leather jacket in my house sweating. So I'm gonna take that off and show off my Moldum Necromold shirt. So that is Necromolds Call to Arms expansion. I hope you all enjoyed a bit of the preview. Let's see. Oh yeah, so Zach is asking a bit about the pledge levels and pricing. So we don't have the preview page up yet, so that's still hidden. And I didn't know this about Kickstarter, but you can't really get the preview page out until you've shared the page with Kickstarter for reviews. So that process is a little gray to me. So you have to get it pre-approved by Kickstarter before you make the preview page, and then I think you have to get it reapproved when you actually go to launch or something like that. But that's all to say that we don't have the preview page up yet. But there will be there's an all-in pledge level for those who already own all of Series 1 and want all the new stuff. So you can do that, and that's going to give you some savings. And really the savings that, or I should say, it gives you a lot of kind of fun freebies that do have value. So, for example, one of the things we want to do is, I know a lot of people play 4-player with base Necromolds, and the expansion is tailored towards 1v1, because that's what the base game is. But we are making a little like a micro expansion or a micro player pack where you can expand the expansion up to 4 players, kind of like we did with the Battle Box. So you'll be able to buy a little pack for, we're finalizing costs, but I think it'll be between 10 and $15. And it'll essentially give you a bunch more of these, right? So it's going to give you more of these, commander banners. It's going to give you more wound markers. So you're going to have more wound markers. and it's also going to give you, more dice and just everything you need to take the game or the expansion from 2-player to 4-player. And that's going to be built in kind of as an extra in the all-in for those who just want all the new stuff. And there's even more savings if you're going, if you're going big and you just want all the Necromolds stuff, including the Series 1 stuff. There's going to be that pledge level too. So so there's like the Monster Pack pledge level, there's the expansion pledge level, then there's the Battle Box pledge level, and then there's our 2 bundles, right? There's the I want all the new stuff bundle, and then there's the I want it all bundle. And there's Kickstarter exclusives that get sprinkled in the mix too, which I'll wait for the Kickstarter to launch to have those shown off. And then Bernardo's asking about the delivery date. So from what I've heard so far, and I have to finalize this, but it's essentially like a year is kind of what we're hoping for. The nice thing with the reprint is much more straightforward, obviously, because we've already manufactured all that stuff before for the most part. So the manufacturing process for the reprint should go pretty quickly, comparatively. And then the new stuff, the nice thing is all the monsters, use the same spellbook template and design, which makes manufacturing the new monsters a lot more quicker and more efficient than the first time around. So I'm hoping it should be like a year turnaround time between, the Kickstarter finalizing and then getting our files approved and then getting into the manufacturing process. So we're still going to lock in dates because I know that those can slide pretty easily, especially with the holiday season, and especially when, if our manufacturer gets backed up with other products being manufactured around the same time. But that's currently what we're looking at. Let's see. Yeah, that's a great question. So Zach's asking about 2-stage shipping. That is something we're going to explore. And so we will, since we'll be using BackerKit, we'll be able to make that optional where if people just want to get them, if people want to get them in 2 shipments, so they get all the Series 1 stuff in a first shipment, and then they get all the new stuff in a second shipment, I think we'll look at doing stuff like that post Kickstarter. What will really make that possible is our order quantity. So if we are ordering so many battle boxes of Series 1 that we can fill, a 40-foot shipping container with, then that makes it just as efficient to ship those in 2 stages versus having to fill a container with a mix of battle boxes and expansion packs and monster packs. So a lot of the shipping efficiency really depends on how things end up with the Kickstarter and what our order quantity ends up being. And that'll all play into the shipping plan. So, if we can order in big enough volume, then the reprint should theoretically be able to ship before the new stuff. And that'll probably be an optional thing where in BackerKit you can opt into that, and I'm sure that'll have a higher shipping fee because it's 2 packages versus the efficiency of 1 package. But you'd obviously get the new stuff a lot sooner or you'd get the reprint a lot sooner than the new expansion. So all of that we'll look into once the campaign finishes, and we can really look at what our order volume looks like. Yeah, thank you for joining, Zach. Let's see. So Joshua's got a quick question. Oh, yeah. So Joshua's just asking about different types of kind of smashing tools besides the caster ring. And that is something that I've thought about. I don't have any official plans or any announcements or anything like that. But that is something that I've tinkered with and thought about because I tried to design it so if you look inside the caster ring, the ring plug is, I'll just kind of hold up my webcam. The ring plug could be popped out and is supposed to be universal. Or I was trying to design it to be universal. So in the future, we could maybe come up with other products that the ring plug could be inset into. Like maybe some sort of like cool medallion necklace that you could wear. And then, it's on a longer chain that you can crush your monster with. And that's, maybe that's how you carry your caster ring. But obviously in the Necromolds lore, having a caster ring is very important because when you're casting your spells, the caster ring is what lets you funnel the energy needed to create a golem without sacrificing your own spirit energy into the creation of that golem. Yeah, and Bernardo's asking about new caster rings. So currently, we're not planning for any new rings. How kind of I've differentiated it in my mind is we had Necromolds Series 1, and then this new expansion is kind of Necromolds Series 1X, right? It's kind of our 1.5 expansion. And I think once we get to Necromolds Series 2, Necromolds Series 2, I think, would be when we introduce maybe a Series 2 line of caster rings to collect. But I think I want to give a little more time to let the kind of the ring collecting community nurture a little bit more and grow a little bit more before we start introducing even more ring designs to the mix. Because anyone who's watching, we do have a Necromolds caster ring trade channel in Discord. So if you end up with a duplicate and there's a ring that you really want that you don't have, you can hopefully connect with another Necromolds player who has the ring you're looking for and do a ring swap and mail each other your rings. And that's something, it kind of reminds me as a kid, trading like Pokemon cards on the playground and trading away your duplicates. And that's something that I want to have happen with the Necromolds rings. So I think the more copies of Necromolds we get out there, the more people will have rings and the more ring trading will be happening. Because there's a lot of different designs. There's 20 different designs in the ring packs that either come in the basalt color or glow in the dark. So when you buy a ring pack, you're going to get one of 40 different options, essentially, 20 designs in 2 colors. Or if you're Toby, you're going to get all hex Rexes, which is great. You could have a whole collection of hex Rexes. Let's see. Yeah, and of course, like Michael just mentioned in the chat, Necromolds, wargaming in general, just like tabletop RPGs, is really customizable. So you and your opponent and the other players at the table can really decide how you want your game to be played. So I try to design Necromolds in a way that is really friendly for designing home rules, and I really encourage that in the rule book. And so it's always cool to hear, like Michael's talking about, when players come up with some of their own home rules or even ways to play with the game that they want to share with the community. And, we'll make them available, just like the Necromolds Mud Bowl rule set we'll make available on our website as a download. And then Casey is asking about new maps. So I do want to make more maps. That is something that I do want to make, but it's not going to be part of this Kickstarter. So this Kickstarter is going to add a bunch of stuff to the current game, which is like the 1X expansion, the 1.5. But once we hit Series 2, we actually started work on this last year before we put all of our attention into this expansion, which is the Series 2 expansion and some of the ideas and things we can do with that. And one of the designs in that expansion has to do with the battle map and kind of new exciting ways that we can approach the battle map and how the battle map can have even more impact on how you play the game. So a lot of cool ideas there. So I am going to sign off. It's about 8:45 my time, and I guess it's been an hour and 45 minutes. So not too bad for the first stream in 8 months. Thank you all for hanging out and joining me. If you think of any more questions, feel free to add them in the chat later, and I'm going to come back in and answer any questions that I missed. And then, of course, the next 3 weeks are all about kind of spreading the word about the expansion as much as possible. So feel free to share the trailer that we put out in July, and just kind of as many eyeballs and as many new people we can introduce Necromolds to. We have a 3-week runway to bring in as many new people as we can to get excited about Necromolds and to really make this next campaign a huge success. And during that 3-week time, not only will I be kind of helping share the game with new photos and stuff like that I'll be posting on the Facebook page, but I'll also be building out our Kickstarter page with cool renders and photography and some more videos and stuff like that, which will be a part of that Kickstarter. So I've got a lot of work to do in the next few weeks, but we've picked our date. We've put our flag in the ground, September 13th, and I will see you all in 3 weeks, if not sooner. I'll probably do some live streams in between now and the actual Kickstarter launch and to do some check-ins. And looks like Austin has one last question. I'll do one more question. Let's see. So what did Austin ask? Oh, yeah. So Austin's asking about giant molds. Giant molds is something that I do want to do. I've thought about either bigger spell books, or I've thought about maybe having a 2-part monster that you need 2 spell books to make. You know, I'm almost thinking of like there's like the card combo in Yu-Gi-Oh, right? If you ever played Yu-Gi-Oh or just watch the cartoon, right? Like if you have the right combination in your army, you can use those to make kind of one Goliath monster. So there's some really fun ideas I've had about how you could introduce even larger monsters to the game. The trick is balancing them. So we've got some ideas on new game mechanics around those Goliath monsters that would have to be introduced to the game in order to make those Goliath monsters worth their weight in clay. And that's something that I've been calling them constructs. It's an idea that I actually had a couple years ago and started exploring as I was trying to figure out what the next expansion was going to be. And then we landed on, of course, Necromolds Call to Arms with our little artifacts and our weapons and our wounds and our advanced combat system. A lot of stuff to be excited about. So again, thank you all for joining me on tonight's live stream. The Kickstarter launches September 13th in 3 weeks. So it's right around the corner. And please kind of keep in touch. Feel free to ask any questions. I'll do more live streams. And over the next few weeks, I'll be sharing more cool photography and images of Necromolds, of the expansion. And I'll start revealing the other 4 monsters. So we revealed one of them tonight. I'll start revealing the other 4 monsters over the course of the next few weeks. So I will hopefully see you all on Kickstarter in 3 weeks, and I will see you on the next live stream. Good night, everybody.